Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for July 21st, 2021. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to defeat the Great Reset and the Green New Deal. Now I know that many of you have the belief that the Davos billionaires are an all-powerful force, that they control everything and they can do whatever they want. You know they're evil, but you think they're indestructible. And almost the inverse of superheroes who can impose their will. And many of you, out of desperation, have taken to turning to websites and news stories that supposedly are talking about a real group of superheroes, the white hats, who exist there somewhere out there in the universe, who are going to swoop down and eliminate the Davos billionaires and all the evil they're imposing on the world. Now, this is a counter myth. It's invented by the same people who have convinced you that the Bill Gates and the Klaus Schwabs and others can do whatever they want. Now, some of you actually believe that there are tribunals underway in the White House, in Guantanamo, and that Hillary and John Brennan and others have already had their heads chopped off. Now, these are delusional stories. And if you actually believe that there are all these body doubles parading around for Brennan, Comey, and others, then you may be beyond help. These are the kinds of delusions that are grabbed onto by desperate people who don't know how to fight the real evil that's been unleashed. So let me tell you what the actual story is, what reality is, and what we can do. The Davos crowd, which is largely organized around corporate cartels, of the City of London, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, cartels in finance, in real estate, in insurance, cartels that control big pharma, the global food supply, and things of that sort. They really do exist, and they have existed for quite a long time. They should be prosecuted under anti-monopoly legislation, antitrust, but they're not. As a result, they have a tremendous amount of power and money and media control, because the media is another one of these corporate cartels. But the problem is that they're evil, but they're also stupid. They're trying to set up a global bankers dictatorship, which will make almost everyone in the world poorer, food dependent on scarce supplies, dependent on sustainable energy, which will actually starve mankind of the electricity that's needed and the power that's needed to survive. It's not going to work. And the question is twofold. Who's going to convince the population that it won't work, and who has an alternative? Now, people all over the world are rising up against governments, some in cases where they're being funded to rise up, as in regime change operations that are run by this elite. But in other cases, people who just don't trust governments, who are angry with the fact that they're hungry, that their jobs have been lost, that they have no sense of a future for their children. So there's a global rebellion. It began with Brexit in 2016, with the Trump election in 2016. It spread throughout Western Europe, throughout Latin America, through the Middle East. People are angry, as are so many Americans. But they have to make sure that their anger doesn't lead them to desperately grab onto fake solutions. Fake solutions, by the way, which are set up by the same people who are trying to run this global bankers dictatorship. The Green New Deal will never work. Neither will the Great Reset. What is the Great Reset? It's to take all power away from elected governments. Now, you may not like your government, you may not like your Congress, but they do give us the one means by which we can affect policy. And that's through elections. That's through contacting legislators. That's through putting fear in them, more fear in them of their constituents and their constituents' desires than they are of the fear of losing money from Wall Street and from the cartels. So we have a recourse through an electoral system, and we have to make sure that electoral system is fair and in the right hands, not in the hands of these criminals. But what they're trying to do is take power away from the representatives and put it into bodies of technocrats. And what I mean by that is right now the money supply, the vast amount of liquidity that's being pumped into bubbles, is going into the hands of the speculators and the swindlers. But there's still governments that make budgets. They want to take away the power of governments to make budgets and put it into the hands of technocrats who are working for the private financial interests, for the City of London, for Wall Street, the offshore tax havens, the drug money bankers, and so on. And the Green New Deal is designed to make sure that the investment in real physical goods production, physical economy, is taken away and instead funneled into this green bubble and convince people that you have to do with less energy, less food, essentially that you live in a world where you have to fight with other people of other countries for a piece of the pie. Now, all of these policies, the Great Reset and Green New Deal, they expose the vulnerability of this establishment. Their system is collapsing. We're undergoing a systemic collapse. The City of London and Wall Street is terrified of this. And they're terrified because there are not just people rising up, but because there are governments that oppose it. And the two most important governments in the world that oppose this Great Reset and Green New Deal are Russia and China. And some of you have been fed information that they're really a part of it, that they're controlled by the same elites. Why do you think there's such an effort to smear and slander Putin and Xi Jinping, the same way there was to smear and slander Donald Trump, to carry out regime change against them? Because they represent sovereign nations which are not interested in bowing down to the demands of the evildoers of Wall Street and London. That's why this new story is coming out, and it's not really a new story. Russian hacking, going back to replay the story of Russiagate. At the same time now they're saying that China is hacking Microsoft. Haven't we learned enough to know that these are fraudulent stories? We know from Edward Snowden who the real cyber criminals are. It's the National Security Agency. It's the GCHQ of London. Those are the cyber criminals. So the attacks that are being made are designed to convince you that you have to feed the bubble by allowing huge amounts of money to go into the defense budget to prepare us to lose a war against those countries. It makes no sense. We've just been through 20 years of war. We have an opportunity to break from that. So here's what I'd like to suggest to you. This Saturday, the 24th of July, there will be a full expose of the fake science behind the Green New Deal, and also the alternative. Investment not in stock bubbles, not in mortgage-backed security bubbles or derivative bubbles, which are set up to draw people in to make you think that you can escape the misery by somehow striking it rich, whether it's with Bitcoin or mortgage-backed securities. But instead, we're going to discuss how we can set up a national credit system to invest in real solutions, the more energy-dense technologies, such as clean coal, but especially nuclear, including the potential to develop nuclear fusion. Right now, the West is shutting down. We're closing our factories. We're importing virtually everything we need. That's the supply chain problem. And in the meantime, we're replacing reliable energy producers with solar and wind, which are not reliable and are insufficient for the needs of a modern civilization. Meanwhile, African countries are working with Russia and China to build new generation nuclear plants, the so-called small modular reactors. The Asian nations are moving ahead. They're not buying into this Green New Deal. So we have an opportunity to organize the majority of mankind around a program that comes out of the traditions of the American economic system, as developed by Lyndon LaRouche in his writings over 50 years. So this will be brought up and discussed in great detail at the conference this Saturday, July 24th, online for free, sponsored by the Schiller Institute. I'd ask you to join us and organize your friends and neighbors and relatives to join us also. Instead of sitting there in desperation, hoping for some mythical force from outside the planet to come down and do away with the evildoers, let's organize to take advantage of their vulnerabilities. Programs such as Glass-Steagall, which will break up the universal banks, anti-monopoly legislation to break up the corporate cartels, and actually go back to a regulated banking system with a national credit policy, which makes volumes of credit available to real production based on scientific advance, not bubbles, whether they're green bubbles or whether they're mortgage-backed security bubbles. The era of bubbles must be put to an end. We can do it. That's how we're going to defeat the Great Reset and the Green New Deal. So join us this Saturday. Now, I will not have an update tomorrow on Thursday, but I'll be back on Friday. See you then.